to another episode of Well, Don't Tell the Kids. I'm Janet Lee, your host, and today I'm speaking with my guest, Jo Ousterhout.
Very nice to be here with you.
I wanted to welcome you. I wanted to find out, where are you currently and what is your role there, or what is the mission of your organization?
Sure. Well, let me talk about Ballot Ready. And actually, I'm not there right now because I was filling in an interim position while they looked for someone permanent. I'm an advisor to them, and so I was just filling in. But let me tell you what Ballot Ready is doing. And today's the perfect day to talk about it because we're less than 5 weeks to the election. And, of course, today was the cloture vote on the Senate with Judge Brett Kavanaugh and whether or not he will be confirmed to the Supreme Court. So it's a day that many people across the country are very interested politically. So Ballot Ready is a nonpartisan voter guide. It's electronic, it's nonpartisan, it's live in all 50 states and D.C. And this election, there are more than 67,000 candidates running for office. And it's not only, the senators and the governors and the Congress people that we hear a lot about, but it's the people that are going to make key decisions in your local community about schools and homes and, trash pickup and curriculums and, everything. So it's really key for all of us to get out and vote. And one reason a lot of us don't vote is because we think we don't have enough information on the candidates or information on enough candidates. So, I may know about my governor and maybe I have a choice there and for my senator, but then for the mayor and the neighborhood councils and the school board and the judges, I don't have a clue, and so I just don't go bother to vote. If you go to ballotready.org and put in your address or your zip code, but it's better with your address because of the way districts are done, districts for different kinds of offices are done, they will give you your entire ballot. And that will show all the candidates running for all the offices that you will be able to vote for. And you can compare them on their backgrounds, their endorsements, their positions on different issues. You can choose issues that are important to you. It might be schools, it might be the budget, it might be the environment, whatever. And it will show you the stated positions of all those candidates side by side. So you can choose who you want to vote for, and then you can either print out your chosen ones to take when you actually go to vote, or you can do an electronic version, send it to your phone. So when you show up to vote in person, or if later you vote absentee in just a paper ballot, you'll have everybody right there, and you can just check them off, and you've already done the research. It's fantastic. These two young women from Chicago started it, Aviva Rossman and Alex Nimchevsky, and they're geniuses. And it's been going for a couple years in a smaller way, and now it's live across all 50 states. So in full disclosure, I'm an investor because I believe so much in the mission of this company, and I'm an advisor and then working with them. But this is something, it's free, it's totally nonpartisan, and it's just there for information for you. And so I really think that this will be a huge help to voters who are already engaged and just want to know more, but also to so many of us who think, I don't know enough to vote.
And this is ballotready.org.
Ballotready.org.
You enter your
address. Your address is better because many districts are different. So like I live in D.C., and so our neighborhood commission district would be different than, say, our, obviously voting for something larger like mayor. But in many places, your water district or your school board district will be different from the district that's your congressional district. And so the more specific your address is, it allows Ballot Ready to make sure that all the districts that apply to your home are in your ballot.
That information is fairly closely guarded or not used for anything other than getting out the information.
Yes, that information is not used for anything else. It's used to give you your ballot. It's just there's so many elections. This is a very interesting election year because not only do we obviously have every congressperson. We have 2/3 of the governors. We have obviously 33 senators. That would always be, you always have that many. But we have so many state legislatures and other offices. So 67,000 candidates running. That's a lot. And they're going to be making a lot of decisions that affect all of us, some on a national level, but many, many local level decisions. And so whatever local issues you care about, then you can go and find the candidates that support your view.
How is it populated? How is the information populated? Are the platforms provided by the candidates or?
No, they're not. And that's different from some of the other information platforms. And the reason it's different is because we wanted to get everything that's out there and not rely on candidates to submit. And it's populated basically by scraping the web. It will look at a candidate's website and pull off statements that they have made or positions, but it will also look at maybe a speech they've made, or if they've been on TV and there's a transcript, it will pull from those things too to get things they've said. And then they pull it. Endorsements are pulled from a range of different entities that endorse. It could be, lawyers groups. It could be more partisan groups, Republican or Democrat. And then the bios are pulled from Wikipedia or from the candidate's page. Okay. Everything is footnoted back, too. So if you see an entry, there'll be a footnote, and you can go back and look at the original source.
Getting at the objectivity-subjectivity question.
It's totally objective. I mean, it's not screened by anything of like, there's only this kind of candidate included, or only if they have a pro XYZ vote. It's not. It's everything that they've said, everything about them pulled into one place so that you can make your best decision.
Now, you mentioned that there's 67,000 candidates up this year. Is that just because of the sheer number of offices that are up, or are you seeing an increase in interest in running?
No, I mean, you're going to have about the same amount of candidates, because in general, it's not always true, but it's got to be like 95 or even plus % of the time you have more than one candidate for each office. So this just happens to be a bigger year in, say, terms of state legislatures and governors and some other things. And I'm thinking, sort of obviously up here at the macro level than in general. So it's more of a pivotal year in that sense. But there would always be, I can't remember how many elective offices off the top of my head there are in the state, but it's an awful lot. Okay. Everything from, seriously, like dog catcher to president.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Curious if you've seen an increase because of increased investment or concern present.
Well, there certainly have been a lot more people running for office this year. I should say there's certainly been a lot more of certain kinds of people, of more women and more people of color running this year. Now, of course, by this time, all the primaries and things are over, so you only have those candidates left. But if you went back to the beginning of 2018, you would see a huge number funneling down to the 67,000. Yeah, because, in some places there have been multiple candidates running for, like, the primary. I'm sort of know more about the House and governors and the Senate. I'm not an expert on the legislatures, but in a number of cases for, say, a congressional office, there might have been 6 or 7 people running, and obviously only one per party is getting through. So there is much more of an interest in being at the level where you can influence things through an elective office, and especially from women and people of color. So many more are running this year than have run in years past. And I don't know if it's picked up in terms of men running, just in general, especially like white men. I think that's always been a fairly robust contingent. So I don't know if that has changed that much, but with women and people of color, it certainly has.
Significance of the upcoming midterm elections, and what would you say to the youth and some of the diverse groups in our listening audience?
Please go vote. Really, please vote. That's right. These offices that we're electing in these elections influence all of our lives. And people say to me, I'm not, quote unquote, I'm not political. But we all are political. Things like when your trash is picked up is a political decision. Whether you can open a business and what it takes to open a business in a particular location, whether it's a virtual business or an IRL business, is a political decision. How you get your driver's license is a political decision. And I know lots of young people don't drive these days, so how your Lyft and Uber drivers get their driver's license. is a political decision, but everything is. Our lives are the fabric of society. The fabric of our operating lives is woven by these different decisions that are made at various political levels, whether it's, what you learn in school because your school board has decided that there are certain books you can read and certain books that you can't, and this is how the science classes should be taught, whether or not they should be taught with evolution. Go on up to your mayor deciding, are you going to open with the city council, are you going to open some new swimming pools in the district, or are we going to have new roads and allow new subdivisions or allow high rises to be built? All these things that happen in our society are really part of the political process. And so if we as citizens don't get involved and vote, then we just are allowing other people to make those decisions for us.
There was somebody famous in history who said that all politics is driven by need.
We all are, and the other one is, all politics is local, because we all really care about what we see and do, day to day.
Register and go vote.
Yeah. And if you need to find out if you're registered, go to iwillvote.com. And there you can check and see if you're registered, and you can also look to see in your state, or if you're in D.C., what the process is for registering in case you're not registered. And in many places now you can register online. The other thing Ballot Ready does is it will show you where your voting location is, and it will also link you to the sites that will tell you what documentation, if any, you need to bring for when you vote.
Let's back up a little bit, and can you just give us a quick rundown of your educational and professional journey? I'm always curious about that. I can see that you started out in biology, of all things.
Yeah. So I think, like a lot of us, when you're young, you know what your parents and your parents' friends do, because those are the adults you see mostly, right?
Yes.
Besides your teachers. And so both of my parents were in academia. They were both professors. And when I was young, they were getting their PhDs, and then they had them, and they were teaching along the way, of course. And my mom teaches in comparative drama, and my dad in fluid dynamics and engineering. So it was really, as a kid, for homework, you had both sides there that could help you with anything that was tough, whether it was English or math. So that was great. So I really loved science. I really did. I liked experimenting. I love knowing how things work. And sort of that's been a theme, I think, in my life, of thinking, how does this work? I'm really curious how this system works, or how that type of organization works. I was also very athletic as a kid, and I really wanted to do something in sports. I played on varsity teams in high school and in college, and my final year in college, William & Mary, where I was, we went to the first ever women's field hockey national tournament, and we came in fourth place, which for a smaller school we were totally excited about, and so I love that. But I couldn't see a path for myself in doing anything in athletics at that time. That was I graduated from college in 1976, and there just weren't a lot of options for women in athletics back then. I was really, really good with math, but math didn't really speak to me in the way that I see that it does for mathematicians who are really good and love it. Equations don't sing to me. They just don't. And I think they're not elegant. And yet to, quote unquote, real mathematicians, they often are. I didn't really see myself in, but I love biology. I love knowing how the natural systems work. At the time there was a very nascent environmental, I wouldn't even say environmental effort, but biology was the closest you could get to learning anything about the environment, and that was of huge interest to me. But as I went through school, through university, so many of the classes and the labs and all, I just realized I wanted to be with people more than sequestered away in a lab. And I also realized that for me, the sometimes often long periods of experimentation, like years and years and years to come up with some amazing breakthrough, I don't have that long an attention span. I wouldn't pursue it for that long. If I had been Watson or Crick, we never would know anything about DNA because I would have, just said, okay, this is not interesting to me at some point. So But I was also very interested in business. I was always the kid that was doing the block party and raising money for this or that. We raised, I had, as I said, a nascent interest in the environment. And so when I was a kid in like 4th, 5th, and 6th grade, I did lots of block parties, corralled my sister and brother and neighborhood kids, and we raised money and sent it to the Sierra Club. And, we sent all of, honestly, like $25. But in the 60s, we thought that was a lot of money. So we were very proud of ourselves. So then after I got out of school and I was sort of thinking of what to do, it seemed that going to business school would be a great alternative. So I worked for a couple of years, one in England and one in New York. And then I went to Wharton at University of Pennsylvania, Wharton grad, and I really liked it. It was a bigger class than normal. In 1978, there were, for whatever reason, the business schools were getting a lot of demand, and so the top schools all had larger classes than normal. And that was great in ours because we had so many foreign students, and we also had a lot of women. I don't have the stats, but there were really a lot. And so that was just very helpful. We also had a lot of people that you wouldn't have think would be business people, like, somebody who had been an artist for a couple of years or a teacher for a couple of years and, and just decided they wanted to change. And so there was a nice mix of different kinds of people in our classes. And I think that helped in terms of discussion. It was a really interesting mix. And after that then, again, it was hard to look at companies. I really didn't have any experience with companies. I mean, they came to interview, of course, but you don't always know what you're getting from an interview. You don't get a good deal. Anyway, I thought banking would be interesting because I had a couple friends in banking and they enjoyed it, but also because it was a way of getting to see a lot of different companies in the American economic sphere, right? Because you're working with different kinds of companies. So I joined a bank in Chicago, which at the time was the 6th largest bank in the country, but now is part of the Bank of America empire. And there's been a huge consolidation in banking over the last, 30, 40 years, and so this was one of the consolidatees. And I started off as a commercial lender, but it's an important job, but it wasn't too exciting to me after a while. However, at that time, often necessity is the mother of invention. Well, Continental Bank, the bank that I was part of, had a bunch of problems, and basically what happened was that the balance sheet was too big for the money that they were able to get to support it. So we had trouble funding ourselves. So what happened was that a number of banks came together and said, we will fund you because you're an important bank. But then, of course, they don't want to keep doing that for too long, especially as Continental started to compete with them. So we had to sell off part of our portfolio, and that was our loans. And that was something that really hadn't been done before, and it opened a whole new market. It's something that banks do now all the time. But back in the day, and that would have been in the mid-'80s, the banks pretty much made a loan to a company and then just kept it on their balance sheet until the loan was repaid or went bankrupt, and then they worked it out, whatever, but they kept it. And now those are routinely sold. So I was lucky enough to be at the forefront of that movement. When I said I'm sort of not happy with this commercial banking rule, one of the EVPs at the bank said, well, look, why don't you come over and help start this? And so that was really, really fun. And so it was a very entrepreneurial job within this larger corporation. And as part of that, then, we also started trading those loans. So not just selling them, but making them more of a very liquid instrument and trading them. And I started the first desk to do that at the bank. And it was there were 3 of us in the whole world that started this at about the same time. And so that was within a couple months of each other. And that was really, really fun. So for years after that, then that's what I did, help people start those kinds of desks and get that business inculcated into other organizations.
Very curious about this chocolate epicure.
After a while, I left banking. Then, actually not of my own accord, I was reorganized out of a position, as so many banks are always reorganizing. And at that time, I was working for a foreign bank, Barclays Capital here in the U.S., and they're constantly reorganizing. So I got reorganized out. And I did some consulting in the same business, but then I was looking around for new things to do, and it was sort of, this was like late 90s, 98, and the internet was becoming a thing, but I don't think to regular people it was. Of course, in Silicon Valley it was, but to other people just weren't using it that much. So I sort of embarked on this plan to teach myself about computers and the internet, and bought some magazines. It was reading books and everything, just sort of on my own. And then a friend called and she said, we're thinking we've started this little company and we don't know how to scale it. Would you be interested in working on that? So I ended up buying the company from them with another friend of mine. We bought it, and then we did scale it pretty successfully for a few years until that internet crash of like 2002. And at that point, Chocolate Epicure was too large to get sort of early stage money, but too small to get
to go on Shark Tank.
To get too small for people who wanted an established business, so we shut down. But the basic idea was that we sold these very high level artisanal chocolates from chocolatiers all around the world to people. And it was great because it was just at the time that people were really starting to think of chocolate as a gourmet food item, not just a box of Whitman samplers, but really a gourmet artisanal kind of thing, like craft beers or wines or I don't know, whiskeys or cigars or any of those gourmet items. And so it was really fun. It was very artistic to work with all these great chocolatiers and just a very fun and interesting business process. And it taught me a lot about the web, but it also taught me that, at least for me, a retail environment is not what I want to do, because working with retail, and of course it's a great business, but you need to know your temperament. So, and to the extent there are younger people listening, when you think about your temperament, and will you, as people come to you with questions about your product or your service or the way you work, you have to just always be upbeat and happy to serve them. You can't sort of say, well, I answered that yesterday or something. You can't do that. There's
a certain demeanor for that.
There's a certain demeanor required, and there should be. And I totally get that. But it was funny because we would get questions like, now remember, this is very early days of the internet, and people would say, I've ordered, but I don't want to give you my address. And we would say, well, how are we going to ship it to you?
Are you going to pick it up?
Yes, just things like that. Or I don't want to give you my credit card number. Well, it was really interesting. And of course, this was a long time before all these hacking issues. So that wasn't really what people were worried about. They were just worried about passing on information that in the past they hadn't had to do. It's good to know that after a while, that to me is those kinds of questions are more operational and not, I personally am not moving forward answering those questions. I'm not learning anything new. And I always have this desire to learn new things.
Yeah, that's evident from your path. You were very very curious and taking initiative and stuff like that.
But it was great. It was a great experience. I learned a lot about the web. It was it's sort of a crash course when you jump into something like that. When you haven't had much experience, or really any, then you learn very, very quickly. And and that was really fun. And many of the people that I worked with, I still know and keep up with, and I just enjoyed being part of that community. So it was a lot of fun. We hired women to work sort of on the organization, the fulfillment and the customer service and all that. So we used a lot of women who were part-time working at home. It was sort of one of the early initiatives to do that. Who wanted to make a little extra money and who had great skills, but their primary job was really their family and raising their children, but this is something that they could do on the side. So that entails a lot of managing and balancing, but that also was very fun to work with them and to give them an opportunity to meet some of their goals, when they were in a place where physically it was going to be difficult for them to find another job. We could do it virtually.
Was there something that caused you to pivot towards the political
After Chocolate Epicure, we were living, my husband and I were living overseas. We were living in Hong Kong for some of that time, and then we moved where we traveled around a lot in Asia, and we were in Hong Kong on 9/11, 2001, and it was really fascinating to see the outpouring of sympathy and empathy for the U.S. And, people came and left huge numbers of bouquets outside the American embassy in Hong Kong. And when we went to China a few weeks after that, and there were, people came up to us on the street and said, "Oh, you must be American. We're so sorry." And there was so much of that. And then we traveled a lot in Asia, and then we moved to London, and there I ended up traveling a lot to Africa and other places for a number of things, and it became very clear to me that the U.S. Held a position in people's minds that I don't think we really appreciate when we live here, and it's sort of a dream, but it's an aspiration, and it's sort of like, this is the golden land in a way, and I felt like we have such an influence on the rest of the world. We have a leadership position that's much more that we have the biggest military force or whatever. There's a psychological leadership position that we have that I felt that we need to take that more seriously, and I felt that one of the ways that we could be an even better leader to the rest of the world is to have more women running the U.S. And making some of these decisions that affect all of us. And women with their different temperaments, and they're often different. We look at the world in a different way than men do, right? We do, and that's okay. But we're not. Both sides are fine. It's just that we only see one side in our government. And so I really thought that would be something that I would like to get more involved in. And sort of as a sideline to that, I mean, I had done this when I moved to London after Chocolate Epicure. I thought, okay, what don't I know about? And one thing I really didn't know much about was the whole not-for-profit world. So my husband worked at Goldman Sachs, and I called Goldman and I said, look, we just moved here. What groups do you work with where you work with that has to do with women and business? And they named a couple, and one of them was Dress for Success. And so I called up Dress for Success, and I said, what do you all need? What can I help with? And they said, well, actually, we're looking for an executive director. Could you come in and help us with that search? And so I did. And then they said, well, why don't you be executive director? And I said, well, I don't know that I really want to be full-time, but I will help you. I will act as executive director and help you find someone. So I did that. And then they asked me to be chair of the board. And so I did that for a while. And that really, that whole experience really helped me understand much more about how that world works, the not-for-profits. And also before that, in 1994, I had been in New York when the Rwandan genocide broke out. And that just seemed so horrific to me that I went to this group that I'd never heard of before called Doctors Without Borders. And now everyone knows them, and they've won a Nobel Prize. But I didn't know them back then. I just saw their name all over the paper that they were trying to do things in Rwanda. So I went to their office and said, what can I help? What can I do? And so I ended up working with their executive director for the U.S., or maybe she had a different title. I can't remember that. But I worked with her to do a number of things in that sort of very crisis period when they of course, they were short-staffed for the magnitude of incoming volunteers and money and queries and everything that they were getting. So those were all really interesting because, I didn't really know anything about how those things worked. I assumed that when you wanted to help in some foreign country, you just went over and set up. Well, you don't do it that way. You have to get approvals and talk with ministers and all that kind of stuff. So it was that was fascinating to me.
It's very remarkable the way your MO. I mean, it may not have been. I think it's a good takeaway for the young or the younger folk who are listening to this. You show up and say, hey, what can I do to help? What's going on?
Yeah, usually that works pretty well because people want help, right? And we're all short-staffed, right? There's never enough time. There's never enough people. There's never enough money to do whatever it is you want to do. It doesn't matter whether you're a corporation or a political party or or an NGO or I don't know, your PTA. There's never enough.
Yeah, you really seem to follow what energizes you, and then you're like, wow, this is not really floating my boat right now. And you make an adjustment.
Yes, I do. And I'm also, maybe I just wasn't self-reflective, or maybe I didn't know how to learn things about myself in the beginning. But then I learned things that I think, okay, I really like these aspects of what I was doing, but I didn't like these aspects. So the next move is trying to hone those down more. Right?
Yeah,
to always get so that you're, at least in my way, I'm always moving towards like the perfect job.
Yeah, that is.
So the perfect way to occupy your time and feel that you're useful to society, that you're being used. All of you is being used. Your strengths and your capabilities and your energy, and so you're useful to society. You're useful to yourself. You're having fun.
Circle back to the beginning here about some of the polarization that's going on. As a global community, we're finding ourselves in a more polarizing situation with all kinds of different views and quite entrenched. Now we're getting a little bit entrenched. So I'm wondering if you have any insight into how we can keep moving forward somehow and avoid just getting in a huge ideological traffic jam or gridlock.
I have a cousin who's really good at this kind of thing, and I'm trying to do what he has done, which really works, and that is that he really talks to people and listens to them, and he doesn't even like almost share his own views. He just sort of keeps trying to drill down on what they're saying. So if they say, I really think Kavanaugh should be confirmed. Then you say, well, okay, so, and tell me more about that. And it's just constantly tell me more about that and tell me more about that. And what seems to happen when he does that is often after a fair amount of discussion, people get down to a base of where they somehow don't feel valued. For whatever reason, they feel disrespected, or they feel, but it's that very personal thing. It's the kind of thing that made that man in Tunisia set himself on fire when the police, he thought, dissed him, right? Because he was being so disregarded. And that's what led to the whole Arab Spring. It's like there's a place where I want to say offend, but that's not quite the right word, but if you strike people in that place, they almost can't, they just lash out because they can't bear it anymore. So somehow Sam, my cousin, has a great way of letting people, very empathetic and sympathetic, and getting it, and then when that comes out, then you have that base, then you can build from something back. But it's a long process, and it's like one-on-one. You can't do that in a group. Maybe you could, but I it seems, and it's very hard because during that you can't, if they say something that is ideologically offensive to you, you can't, if you lash out, then you've stopped everything. Yeah. So it's really hard. And, I think like a lot of people, I have people in my family that it is really, really difficult to talk to now. And it's just hard. And I think that, we don't even like each other as much as we did a few years ago. And that's, these are people I've known my whole life. And it's really, really hard. So I'm trying. I think Sam's thing is the best, you just try to talk to people and actually, it's interesting you say this because you asked this question because one of those people in my family is coming to visit me in a couple weeks. It's my mom's birthday, and he and his wife will be staying with me. I thought the last time we saw them, there was just a lot of butting of heads. And so I'm really going to try to maintain my cool and just ask more questions to get to the bottom of really his thoughts, his feelings, not his sort of intellectual stuff, but what he's really feeling about things and why why certain things don't bother him and certain things do.
Hey, you see if your cousin's busy. Can come out.
Well, actually, the funny thing is, he's going to be here that same weekend because it's my mom's birthday, so he's going to.
Perfect. Well, I think that's very
maybe
wise.
I should let him talk to it. Maybe I should let him talk.
No, just all you could have together. Together. I think that's very wise. The listening, and then they on top of that feel like they're not being heard by anybody who has any power to make the change, right?
Yeah.
So there's the vote, and also there's our current, the current uproar, the protest that's happening yesterday on Capitol Hill, and at some point we have to start listening to each other and doing something constructive.
It's like the voters, the citizenry, have to sort of model for our leaders what we want to see because they're not showing it. A thought I had listening to the testimonies last week of both Dr. Blasey Ford and Judge Kavanaugh, and then seeing the questions that the senators posed to them. I was thinking that maybe, and hopefully this will happen with some of these new candidates that are running for office, is maybe we need less prosecutors as congresspeople. And the reason I say it, not that they may be great ones, it's just as a profession, what you do when you're a prosecutor is you are there for your client, right? You're really not there for the truth. You're there supporting your client. And your client might be a person or a company, or in this case, in a way, your client is a political party. I'm not really interested in finding the truth out about something. I'm interested in scoring the points that are going to, and elaborating on the points, and only showing the points that are going to make my client, my party, look good. And this happens on both sides. So, even though I have a strong ideological basis, I'm more one party than the other, I see it happening on both. Just the way that people ask questions and the selection of the facts that they tend to use, or that they do use. And so maybe if we had more like regular people up there, I don't know, or maybe if we had more scientists. There's a great group, 314 Action, 314 for the number pi, 3.1415.
An approximation of pi.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. So 314 Action that's working on getting more scientists in the office. And I think, maybe that's going to be a positive thing, because if we had a few more people that were focused on finding the truth out about something. I mean, there can always, I suppose, be an ideological bent towards something, and there is even in science, right? I mean, different papers are selected for different journals and proceedings and all that kind of stuff. That's a little bit political with groups of people. But I just think that we need, we really need a better cross-section in government of backgrounds and colors and genders and age and all these things that will bring, so that we are mirroring, our leaders are mirroring more what we all are, as opposed to just being sort of a few small segments.
We shall see which way,
We can check in after the midterms and see what's happened. Yeah, because the midterms will be fascinating one way or another. They're going to be really interesting, and I expect that there will be lots of really interesting new people in different positions.
And the great American experiment continues.
Exactly. It really does. We're all part of it.
Hopefully it won't
we're all scientists anyway.
So once again, we put forward ballotready.org and iwillvote.com. And then you mentioned the scientist one was 314. What was it?
It's 314 Action. Is the group that supports, I can't remember if it's .org or whatever, but if you Google 314 Action, it's a PAC supporting, a political action committee supporting scientists. And I think that I'm pretty sure they're non-denominational. They're just scientists. Yeah.
Not just a bunch of quantum physicists running around, huh?
No, there are other kinds too.
I'm just kidding. Okay. All right. Well, you know what? That's all the time we have for today, but I really wanted to thank you for contributing to this conversation. I think that you're an important voice and very enlightening to hear where you've been and what your projections are for the future, our near future.
Well, Janet, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you so much.
So once again, my guest has been Jo Ousterhout. I'm Janet Lee, and please stay tuned for more episodes of Well, Don't Tell the Kids.